Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA. The local time is 5:48 p.m. and we will begin our discussion this evening about Ice Age waterfalls at the top of the hour at 6 p.m. That's about 12 minutes from now. Thanks to those of you who are here early, more than 200 of you. How's everybody doing tonight? Hello, Richard. Garrett from the Netherlands. Jim and Debbie from Caldwell, Idaho. I'm seeing lots of familiar names. It's nice that we have this community. Rebecca from Virginia, Levi, Max, and Davis from Portland. How you doing, kids? East Tennessee, Sudbury. I can almost recite these in my sleep at this point. Hello from Maine, Tacoma, Houston. Southern Spain. You're up in the middle of the night, and I'm grateful for that. I'll do my best to make things work for you. Hello, Jack and Ryan from Southern California. Must be hot down there. Today is warm here, but we've had 30-mile-an-hour winds most of the day. So it's a good thing we're back inside. France, hello. There's that town in Maine again. I'm going to have to get that spelled phonetically. Afternoon from New Zealand. Hello, Rob. Terrific. So I assume things are working for us streaming-wise, and we're feeling real good about things. This is our third night in a row. And we've had a theme all three of these evening sessions this week. And tonight is part 3 of our trilogy, our Ice Age Floods trilogy. And if you were with us last night, you heard me say that I still have more. Well, that was interesting. So, are we back? Are we functional? Let's see, we lost about 20 people. Thank you. Boy, that hasn't happened in a long time. So I didn't have to start a different live stream, so this is the same stream, right? You didn't have to go someplace else. And did you have to refresh, or did I just naturally come right back on for you? Same stream. Not working, I'm frozen. Okay, well, I'm frozen for some people, so maybe you can help them out. Or if you can somehow see me, refresh your browser, please. But I think we dodged a bullet there. I see that we're approaching 300 people, so I think we have pretty much everybody we started with. You know, that's an advantage of doing this so often in the last month and a half. I'm not freaking out like I was, you know, that first week. I had no idea what was going on, and I had no experience. So unless I'm missing something, I think we're okay. And it is a very windy evening. The chalkboard took another face plant in the backyard, even though it was not vertical. Still took a dive. So this is 2 very windy evenings that we've had this major streaming issue. It can't be an accident, but if you work for some streaming service, I'm sure you'll tell me I'm out of it. So Reni's having focus problems. Some other people are having some focus problems. Oh man, it's probably 35 miles an hour right now. We might have more issues. So we still have 5 minutes, and I don't think I'm going to do a whole lot of song and dance here. I just want to concentrate and make sure we've got everybody feeling like they've got the quality that they need. So if you guys can talk to each other about solving things, actually let me ask you, can you give me a feeling now? Are you having problems with focus? Are you having problems with sound or with our clarity and a strong stream at this point? 5 by 5, all good, all good. I don't have the quality. Yeah, Jason, smart ass. Okay. Well, most of you are okay. I don't know how to help you. I think since most of you have the same experience you've had for many of these nights, then I'll have you guys talk to each other for a few minutes about problem solving. I don't think it's my end is my point. Actually, I do have a couple quick things to say. So this is Joanna and Neil who drove this carrot cake up last night. They drove it up on Monday and we used it last night. And you can get your own piece of carrot cake at the restaurant, Foodie's Brick and Mortar, down Tri-Cities in southern Washington at any time, I assume. And I don't say this casually, that's the best carrot cake I've ever had, easily. And Liz said the same thing last night, independent of me, so, and we rarely agree on anything. So, high quality carrot cake. Thanks again, Joanne and Neil. And speaking of that, I put an offer out there last night and it stands. If you're close to Ellensburg, we're going to get started at our usual time, 6 o'clock. Of course, I'll get carried away. I've got a bunch of video clips that I want to show you. So I'm guessing it will be 8:15. Wait, I'm guessing it'll be 7:15-ish, 7:15. We'll start visiting with folks in the backyard here. And I've got like 80% of that carrot cake ready to be cut up. And I might ask for a couple of captains out there who can slice and serve. I've got paper plates, I got plastic forks, I've got a bunch of Ziploc bags, tons of them if you want to just grab a slice and then take off. We need to be responsible and keep our distance, blah, 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 but we'll be out there visiting, and I'll be out there 7:15 till it gets dark, I suppose. We'll just visit with whoever wants to come over. So you're looking for a piece of carrot cake? Can you get to my house? You'll find my house. And I'll see you out in the backyard starting about 8:15. I suppose around 8 o'clock you might see a few folks out hanging out outside waiting for us to be done. So that's the plan there. I've never weighed more than I weigh right now in my life. So I need to get rid of this carrot cake, even though it's the best carrot cake by far that I've ever had. We still doing okay? Now I'm a little bit delay in the comments, but I'm checking one more time if we feel like there's anything that needs to be done on my end, but I think we're good, huh? Good. I got one more thing. Half an hour ago, I met Evelyn and her brother Isaac and her dad. Didn't catch your name, sorry. And Evelyn and brother Isaac cannot join us for cake, but I got a nice letter from Evelyn and some amazing artwork from Evelyn, age 7. It's May Day tomorrow, you know. And I got a nice piece of artwork from Evelyn as well. 2 pieces of artwork. So thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Isaac. It was nice to meet you, and I hope we get a chance to visit sometime soon. Evelyn also put in a favorite rock of hers. I haven't had time to read your letter yet, Evelyn, so maybe you want to know what kind of rock this is, or maybe you just wanted to share. We can talk about that the next time you come over. Okay, it's 6 o'clock, but I need a minute, okay? I'm gonna need a minute. Well, here's to you. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's 6 o'clock and we're going to begin talking about Ice Age waterfalls right now. It's yet another live stream talking about the Ice Age floods here in the Pacific Northwest. My name is Nick Zentner. I teach at the college in town. I'm a geology professor, and I'm happy to share this information with you, as I've been doing over the years through public lectures and video programs, and we'll visit some of those video programs tonight in the Cozy Fort. Yeah, I got a few props tonight as well, and we'll get into that in a bit. But I think we need to backtrack for just a second, visit a little bit of what we did on Tuesday night with the Palouse Hills, last night what we did with slackwater sediments at the bottom of Lake Lewis and the bottom of Glacial Lake Columbia, and that will help us set our stage for tonight. Tonight we're going to ask some key questions. Questions like, why were there waterfalls at all in the channeled scablands of eastern Washington? Why were those waterfalls located where they were? Why weren't there hundreds of waterfall locations? Why are there just a few? And where are we going tonight? Well, we're going to Dry Falls, of course, the most famous geology site in all the Pacific Northwest. We're going to Palouse Falls tonight, an equally impressive place. We're going to Frenchman Coulee, a little bit of Potholes Coulee, a little bit of Babcock Bench right behind the Gorge Amphitheater where all the music shows are. I think that's all, but that's plenty. And there'll be some themes tonight trying to explain different erosional patterns with the basalt bedrock. Perfect timing. So, let's start by looking at a couple key diagrams that I found after cleaning up the porch this morning. Regulars with us know this story now. We know that we had 200 feet of kitchen flour, that's the wind-blown silt known as loess, sitting top of the German chocolate cake. That's the basalt. 16 million year old basalt, 16,000 year old floods coming through that area. And when we do have massive ice age flood erosion where the water is moving very, very fast, we not only take the loess away, but we take substantial amounts of the bedrock itself. And that's our topic tonight. How are we actually making these coulees? Now, you've heard the word coulee. You've heard of Grand Coulee Dam, for instance. That's the Grand Coulee. So out here, a coulee is a very uniquely shaped valley, and it's got a perfectly flat floor, and its walls are absolutely vertical. And I'm here to tell you that the waterfalls somehow created these coulees. That's really the main thing I'd like to do with you tonight. It's kind of casually said the Ice Age floods make the coulees, and you're like, okay, I guess. And then when you really start thinking about it, like, I don't get it. Like, all this stuff is being like just rushed out of there immediately by the water? Well, not quite, especially when you look down from a hot air balloon on a coulee forming. It's a retreating waterfall story, and I've got a couple props that may be able to help us visualize that. And of course, there's different coulees of different sizes, but I'd like you to connect waterfalls with forming these coulees, and we'll see if I can't help you kind of flesh that out. Okay. So Tuesday night, we took a scene like this. Here's actually what these amazing loose hills look like. And there's still places like this, obviously. This is a wonderful photo by Rick, who sent this to me a couple of years ago. And this is what the Palouse Hills look like, where the Ice Age floods missed the whole story. We're done with that. We're not talking about that. In places where that water actually leaves the area, it slows down and actually gets stopped down here by Tri-Cities. This is a review from last night. And so all that kitchen flour that was picked up, all of that loess, gets deposited in the bottom of Lake Lewis. This is where the water is dead calm. This is not tonight's topic. Tonight's topic, we need fast water. If we want to have a waterfall, if we want to create a coulee, we cannot be here. Last night was talking about where that very fast, energetic water comes to rest, and as that Lake Lewis water sits there in southern Washington, we start depositing slack water sediments, like these. And we found last night, we're almost done with our review, we found last night that every one of these slack water sediment layers is now interpreted as a separate Ice Age flood. Each of these is a new batch of silt that gets swept away from the loose hills by the Ice Age flood water, but we're going to drop all that silt when we have that water come to rest. And we had a little experiment last night where all that silt was falling out of the bottom of the water. Feeling okay? Hi, Bijou. You want to say hi to these guys? Okay. The live Q&A last night, and we'll do some Q&A again tonight, of course. The live Q&A last night, I was surprised, but also realized I didn't teach well enough last night because we had a number of questions confusing where we're eroding the loess and then realizing that there's a totally different place where we're depositing the loess. Again, fast water versus slack water or stopped water. So, as a response to that, let's see if this helps. We looked at this map last night, and I'm going to really slow it down and hold it as steady as I can for you. And those that know Eastern Washington can pick up some landmarks. That's Interstate 90 going across the middle of the picture. So this is the best way I can show you how to review the last couple of nights. Tonight we're going to have Ice Age waterfalls in these places where the water is moving extremely fast. The water's moving at freeway speeds. And remember, I'm promising a discussion tonight of why is the water moving fast there and there? Why don't we have water moving fast? Why isn't everything gone? Why didn't we just have a huge wall of water racing across Washington and just picking up all the loess? Instead, we just have these key places where we have this fast water. But last night we were making the slack water sediments where we stopped the water. So we've got literally 50-mile-an-hour water here and literally 0 mile an hour water here. I don't think that was clear last night. So we're going to pick up the loess where we're moving fast water. We're going to deposit that loess at the bottom of Lake Lewis when we stop the water. And of course, we had another glacial lake up here, Glacial Lake Columbia, which is kind of a whole separate story. Okay, well, since I have this here, and just in case this is a helpful diagram to you, let me give you a couple of quick answers right off the bat about why we have the fast water moving where we do. One way to answer the question is, let's start over here. There was amazingly fast water that was coming from Montana as it broke through the ice dam in northern Idaho, and that fast water was coming right over Spokane. Now, I know hardly anything about Spokane geology, but I know about the Rathdrum Prairie. There's a little town called Rathdrum, and this is a whole broad area that's very unique between Spokane and Lake Pend Oreille. And there's amazing, I forget the number, there's like 800 feet of like river rocks that are just filling that Rathdrum Prairie. And those river rocks were dumped there by the Ice Age floods because that water was moving so fast. So even though we have the Spokane area being one of our fast-moving water areas, we don't have huge coulees. We do not have huge coulees at Spokane. And that's mainly because we haven't gotten onto the German chocolate cake yet. The German chocolate cake is going to be part of our discussion tonight, once again. I actually have some details within the German chocolate cake that will help us. But one way to answer the question is we have fast water here because it's a straight shot. There were times where we had an Ice Age flood coming from Montana. It was cruising over John Stockton's house, and that water went straight down the Cheney-Palouse track and dumped right into the Snake River down here. And it's not an accident. That's why Palouse Falls is located where it is. Okay? Also, while I'm thinking about it, we're starting to learn just a little bit more about the oldest Ice Age floods. Ice Age floods that happened more than, Ice Age floods that happened even 1 million years ago. You haven't heard much about those because we know precious little about it. But there's growing evidence that this Cheney-Palouse track is a place that we had some very old Ice Age floods. Generally older floods here and much younger floods up here. There's exceptions to that, but that's a new, even for you veterans of the Ice Age floods, that's maybe a new concept. This is the Telford Crab Creek area where we had fast water, but this was basically a track where we had some fast water on occasion because this was a low rim in the bathtub up at Glacial Lake Columbia. So for the rookies with us tonight, we had a huge ice sheet. We had Glacial Lake Columbia in green over here. We had Glacial Lake Columbia in green. And when we dump Glacial Lake Missoula water catastrophically into Glacial Lake Columbia, we're going to overflow this bathtub. And there are low spots on that southern rim of the bathtub. And the Telford Crab Creek section is going to get a bunch of fast water. But there really aren't Ice Age waterfalls here. In fact, there aren't. And even the Scablands here, there aren't major coulees in this Telford Crab Creek. So instead, we're spending most of our time tonight, if we're talking about waterfalls, and we are, we're spending most of our time talking about this path, and then this obviously is a major pathway for very fast, energetic water. What's this? It's the Grand Coulee. And the Grand Coulee is a place where we have funneled fast water because we've got an ice sheet here during many of these major floods. We also have a structural fold called the Coulee monocline, which helps funnel a bunch of that water. So Palouse Waterfall because we have a straight shot, Dry Falls, and the huge Grand Coulee system where we're visiting tonight because we're in a place where the ice sheet is causing a bunch of this water to go over land. Okay, that's the regional context best that I can. Let me verbally give you two things that I'd like to set with you before we drill down to some details. The German chocolate cake got hammered, got ripped up We don't care about the loess now. That's like frosting on the cake. We don't care about it. Now we're talking tonight about this fast water, this angry brown water digging into the German chocolate cake, which are the Columbia River basalts. And I'd like to talk about two specific features tonight where the cake has been ravaged. One are these amazing Ice Age waterfall areas. But two, I'm not flipping you off, two are places where this crazy amount of pothole development is. There's places where we have holes that have been carved into the German chocolate cake, and those holes are 50 feet wide and 50 feet deep. And even more cool than that, with this area that has a bunch of potholes drilled into it, if you get up in the air, which we'll do tonight using Bruce Bjornstad's wonderful drone photography, we've got what I call, and I think even Bruce used this, kind of a wormy surface. In other words, there's a very unique looking kind of place where it looks like you're taking the German chocolate cake and just kind of dragging your fingers over the surface and making these kind of worm-like scallops into the part of that German chocolate cake. Why are those wormy scallops, we'll use that, why are those wormy scallops with potholes located where they are? They're not everywhere. Is there a pattern to where those are found? And then of course, why are we getting waterfalls where we have them? You ready for some details? Let's do it. We need to make the German chocolate cake, which we'll do quickly because we've done it ad nauseum now, many times with these live streams. 16 million years ago, major cracks in the Idaho, Washington, Oregon area. We flood the area with lavas, and this is Grand Ronde time. He goes to the whiteboard. We're actually going to cut open the German chocolate cake tonight. We're going to look carefully at the guts of the German chocolate cake. And what you're looking at here is the entire German chocolate cake from bottom to top. There's 300 layers. Of course, I'm not showing all 300 layers, but I'm showing our academic subdivisions of the German chocolate cake. The eruptions of lava began 16.7 million years ago and so on. You can see that 73%, let's say 3/4 of the German chocolate cake is this Grand Ronde time. And tonight we're going to call those Grand Ronde lavas stubborn. You ready for a major point? These Grand Ronde lavas, the Grand Ronde portion of the German chocolate cake, is very difficult to ravage. It's very difficult to pick up and carry it away. Even if you are fast-moving Ice Age floodwater, the floodwaters had a hell of a time getting that Grand Ronde rock out of there. So what I'd like you to visualize is that the top of the Grand Ronde is a key place for us tonight. And it's a favorite concept of mine that I use on many field trips that I've led through the years out there. I say, hey, look, you see where we are? This is the top of the Grand Ronde. Top of the Grand Ronde. Top of the Grand Ronde. And that's what Babcock Bench is. You'll see it in a bit. This is what the base of Dry Falls is. Why not? Let's look at it now. He goes to the other whiteboard. Dry Falls is a place where a waterfall used to be. Dry Falls has a plunge pool at the bottom where that waterfall used to be. But my message to you is, those waterfalls were pounding hard onto the surface of the stubborn Grand Ronde lavas. And I just gave it away. Those potholes, those wormy, what did I just call it? I forget. That wormy area, that's wormy scallops, that wormy scallop surface is almost always on the top of the stubborn Grand Ronde lavas. So when we look at I think there's 5 short video clips I have for you tonight. I'll keep reminding you where we are in the cake. The Wanapum flows and the Saddle Mountain flows are young and they're wimpy. and they are heavily fractured. You want to see what a classic Saddle Mountain or Wanapum flow looks like? You've already seen them if you looked at the columnar basalt show. Here we go. So when I think of the Saddle Mountain lavas or the Wanapum lavas, I think heavily fractured. You can see vertical and horizontal fractures, pretty thin flows, and it's easy for water to take this rock away because the rock is pre-cut and ready to be hauled out of there. The Grand Ronde, the lavas are way thicker than this. They're much less fractured than this. They were just monster lava flows. And they don't typically have the columns like you see here. So the Ice Edge floods had an easy time hauling this rock away. The Ice Age floods had a very difficult time getting the Grand Ronde lavas away. So, this is Frenchman Coulee, a nice aerial shot. What's your guess? Would you guess that these are Wanapum or Grand Ronde lavas? I'll wait. I'll wait. Are we that much of a delay? Are these Thank you, Mark. Oh, Richard, bonus points. So you can see these amazing curved cliffs. And every one of those curved cliffs is a place where we used to have a waterfall. Of course, we all think of Niagara Falls, and that's fine to a certain degree. So can you imagine when we had an Ice Age flood going from my nose over to the river? The water's going to drop over those curved cliffs, and it's going to make a beautiful waterfall. There's going to be one waterfall there. There's going to be another waterfall next door. In fact, these curved cliffs are usually found in tandems like this. There's the same tandem curved cliffs in Potholes Coulee, otherwise known as ancient lakes. But my point is, the rock walls of these curved cliffs are Wanapum. They were hauled out of there. In fact, there was a lot more Wanapum lava here, of course, that's gone. But Richard is correct if you said both, because what do you suppose is on the bottom of Frenchman Coulee? Where are we in the cake at the bottom of Frenchman Coulee or the bottom of Echo Basin? And the answer is the top of the Grand Ronde. The floors of many of these coulees are so flat because we're right on top of the stubborn Grand Ronde lava. So I just showed you this for dry falls, but it also is appropriate for what I just showed you at Frenchman Coulee, at Potholes Coulee, and at Dry Falls. And again, I'm reminding you where we are in the German chocolate cake. Okay, you're waiting for props. Tomorrow is May Day. At least in the States, we have a tradition. I remember as a kid, what do you do on May Day? You get a little basket of flowers, you go to your neighbor's house, you sneak up, put the little basket of flowers, and then you knock on the door and then you run. Well, I basically had this afternoon. I happened to open the door as I was getting set up. I opened the front door, and there was a German chocolate cake. I didn't hear the knock, but nobody was there, and there was a German chocolate cake. I got an email later. It's from George. So thank you, George, for your generosity to drop off this German chocolate cake, which was representing our 300 layers of our story. But if I really want to use the German chocolate cake tonight, can I do something with the other half to properly show that there are differences in erodibility within the German chocolate cake? What should I have done with this cake to show you that the stubborn Grand Ronde is not going to go away easier than the Wanapum? I said that awkwardly, but you know what I mean. Well, I did it kind of successfully. So I took George's German chocolate cake and I made a prominent bench. And so the icing going through the middle of George's German chocolate cake is our heavy black line here. And I think we can see the point now. That all throughout the channeled scablands, where waterfalls are doing their thing, the waterfalls are easily taking the wanapum, but the Grand Ronde is much more stubborn to erosion. And so, I'm going to drill potholes into the surface of the Grand Ronde only. You're just not forming potholes in the wanapum. Because remember, that's all a bunch of Tootsie Rolls where this stuff's getting hauled off easily. But the potholes and even the wormy scallops, it's not still in my head. I'm not flipping you off. I can't really do it. I don't have enough acreage. But basically, a bunch of these potholes are sometimes, they blend into each other. And it's the water working real hard to take the bottom part of this away, but it's not working because those Grand Ronde flows are so stubborn. Okay? I got one more major thing I want to do with another prop that's super experimental. You know, half the fun of these props is I don't even try them before I try it with you, so we'll see if it works. But I'm coming back to this because I've never done it this way before. I kind of like it. Maybe it'll be helpful to you. So we're digging hard through the wanapum here, making Grand Coulee. We're digging hard here. I don't know the basalt stratigraphy over there as well, but I'll bet you it's wanapum over there as well. And less digging here. And this is long before we get to the slackwater sediments. Since we're hitting this so hard, since one of the main messages tonight is the difference between the Grand Ronde portion of the cake and the wanapum part of the cake, let me give you another way to view the difference between the stubborn Grand Ronde and the, what's the opposite of stubborn? Wanapums. So here's the Grand Ronde flows. These are the stubborn guys. And a big reason they're stubborn is because they had such incredible acreage that they covered. Some of these lavas made it from the fissure all the way to the Oregon coast. And again, they're extremely thick as well. Many of these Grand Ronde flows average 100 feet thick. But when we transition over to the wimpy wanapum and Saddle Mountain flows, one of the reasons is the wanapum flows didn't travel as far. There's not as much mass. Each of these is a separate eruption during the wanapum time. Here's our crinkle-cut French fries flow, the Rosa flow that's been picked up easily in Frenchman Coulee, and even the ginkgo flow. So you get the idea that these are easier flows to erode because they're not as thick, they didn't travel as far, and they have many more fractures within them as a result. Okay, the last thing I'm going to try, and it's 6:30, so this is good, is I want to use my mystery prop in here on the kitchen table to try to show you. I've never had success beyond just saying waterfalls create coulees. And everybody's like, huh? So let me try to show you our model for how waterfalls are actually making these box-shaped coulees. What prop would you use from the kitchen? All right, I got a sharp knife. I promise I'll be careful with it. Kids, this is called a spoon. I've got a spoon. I promise I'll be careful with it. And I have this. This could be a disaster. These are hamburger buns. Stale, and tasteless. I only use the hamburger buns so I don't have to sink my fingers into this stuff and get them all greasy. What is this? It's butter. It's been butter, 2 sticks of little, I don't know how many tablespoons this is, I'm sure you'll tell me. 2 sticks of butter, refrigerated, but it's been out of the refrigerator for half an hour. And I want to make a coulee. And I want to make a coulee by sending Ice Age flood water maybe down some kind of stream channel. It doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes you make coulees out of nothing. Sometimes you don't have a pre-existing drainage whatsoever. But for our purposes, especially since I have 2 sticks of butter sitting next to each other, let's have this be some sort of just regular river drainage in this mature topography before we bring the Ice Age floods. I'm going to make the Grand Coulee, okay? And drum roll, please. Oh, I need a plate. Yeah. If I can get this to work, I'm going to put the scoops of butter that I removed from our coulee. I got to put them somewhere. And that's a question we can address in live Q&A. Where did all that stuff, where did the butter go? But here we go. What I want to do is I want to start to make a coulee. What's the goal? I want to make a valley that's box-shaped in this 2 stick of butter routine. But I'm going to do it not by having the Ice Age floods just come through and rip everything out on one Sunday morning. Instead, I want to have a flood go over the surface, and then I want a flood to fall over the lip of this, a waterfall. And I want the waterfall to be so powerful. In other words, this is real now. This is a 350-foot high cliff of basalt. Are you with me? This is the German chocolate cake. It's not German chocolate cake right now. It's freaking butter, okay? It's effing butter. But we're going to make a coulee in the basalt by having a waterfall go over 350 feet of basalt. But the key is I need 350 feet of water. Many of these Ice Age floods that came down what is now the Grand Coulee, the thickness of the water column matched the thickness of the cliff. So if we have that much water moving that fast, coming over the rim of this butter, we're going to chew in, we're going to ravage, we're going to exploit. It's thesaurus time now. Let's do it. Waterfall, you got it? It's flowing, it's flowing. Dirty brown water coming over the edge. Uh-oh. We got some sort of Red Sea thing happening. That's not what we wanted. God dang it. This is too hard. Hang on. You didn't see that. Hang on. You didn't see that. Okay. The butter's a little too hard for me, but I'll continue. I want you to look down on this. There's our curved cliff. It's not really Niagara Falls. It's not a river flowing over the cliff. It's a lot more water flowing over the cliff, but we're still going to have those curved cliffs as we look down on them, just like we did before. But here's the point I want to make. Here's the point I want to make. Talk amongst yourselves. I've got a steep-walled, flat-floored coulee. I've started to make the Grand Coulee, not by the whole thing being scalloped out at once, but instead by a waterfall ripping off a portion of the waterfall rim. So that original waterfall was at Soap Lake. And now the waterfall after that one Ice Age flood is, let's pick a number. Nobody really knows. 1 mile. This waterfall rim is 1 mile north of Soap Lake after that first Ice Age flood, and we've removed X amount of basalt and sent it downstream towards the Quincy Basin. Why not? Let's try it again. You want to bring in another Ice Age flood? It's Glacial Lake Columbia overspilling. The Okanagan lobe is in place. Here comes a huge batch of water coming down towards Soap Lake. Waterfall cascading down into this newly formed coulee from 100 years earlier. Here we go. Okay? We've lengthened the Grand Coulee by 2 miles, let's say. I'm just making up numbers now. But if we continue to do this, we're always going to have a scalloped cliff, or in other words, a curved cliff looking down, but the sidewalls and the floor of Grand Coulee perfectly vertical, perfectly horizontal because of the cracked nature of the basalt. Dry Falls is 13 miles north of Soap Lake. So we have eaten back this rim. We've eaten back this waterfall rim from originally down at Soap Lake to Dry Falls. 13 miles in maybe a dozen floods. We don't really know the exact number of floods or how much that waterfall rim marched back each time. Same thing at Palouse Falls, by the way. Waterfall retreat. Same thing at Frenchman Coulee or Potholes Coulee, ancient lakes. We retreat these waterfall rims and we make coulees gradually as a result. Wrong word. We make coulees in fits and starts as we continue to chew away at the waterfall rim. Successful? Maybe. I need to disrobe because we're going in the cozy fort momentarily and it's very hot in there with you. But before we go in, I want to visit this wonderful book one more time with you to get you into it. This is The Grand Coulee by J. Harlan Bretz, 1932. 1932. He's still many decades away from acceptance by anybody, really. And yet he has this amazing publication, loaned to me by Jim Gartrell here in Ellensburg. Thank you, Jim. I'm about to return this to you. Here are some photos from the late 1920s and the early 1930s of driving up the floor of the Grand Coulee, which of course you can drive up the lower Grand Coulee today, but you can no longer drive up the floor of the upper Grand Coulee because Banks Lake now sits in there due to the Columbia Irrigation Project. So you're seeing what I'm showing you in the butter, that the walls are vertical, the floors are horizontal. And as I mentioned with our J. Harlan Bretz live streams, oh, hang on, I jumped the gun. Here's a pretty classic Bretz illustration. He must have done this by hand in his office at University of Chicago. And he is documenting what we were just trying to do with the sticks of butter. And he didn't really know the different layers in the German chocolate cake, but he certainly knew these geometries and how everything was vertical and horizontal. But here's what I really wanted to show you. Quiz time. Our deep potholes and our wormy scallops on a very impressive surface. Where are we in the German chocolate cake with those? Wormy scallops on top of what? The stubborn Grand Ronde. Here's Bretz hiring some airplane people in 1931. And this is our first look from a publication that's 70 years old, 90 years old. That's our first look at these incredible wormy scallops. That's the top of the Grand Ronde lava. And so if you've heard the age-old story of Brett's not being accepted by anybody until people got up in the air, that's a myth that is incorrect. Here's Brett's in 1932 with all these amazing photographs and many aerial photographs, and yet people still didn't believe him. For the advanced students, Brett's made a compelling case that we still believe that the floor of Grand Coulee today is not the same place as where we had a previously existing drainage. Brett does a nice job in this portion of the book convincing everybody that there was a river valley where the Grand Coulee is now, but that river valley is not in the same location as where the guts of the Grand Coulee is today. And we're going to, before we quit in the Cozy Fort, we're going here. Bruce Bjornstad is going to have his drone fly right over that. But Brett's, I don't know how he got that shot. Is that from an airplane? I'm not sure. I'll do a couple more because this is so fun. Here's Brett's aerial photography, Dry Falls. Here's Brett's taking the same picture and then using his little ink pens, telling us about what we were just talking about. 1932. I can't stop. It's an amazing publication. Ice Age floods erosion, including a retreating waterfall system. Last one I'll show you, because we're about to go here with living color. Brett's taking a picture of Dry Falls. Before the irrigation, before Grand Coulee Dam, etc. Okay, the butter's melting. The cake has been used. It's Cozy Fort time. I've got 6 short clips queued up for you, so that'll probably take us to close to 7 o'clock. But this is especially important, I think, for this particular episode. You need to see these places, especially for those around the world who have not been to this location. And I will show you mostly stuff that I have done, of course, because I'm deeply in love with myself. Even though I have neck hair that's now like ready to be mowed like a first crop of alfalfa. It's driving me crazy. But again, I promise that the last 2 video clips, we will visit Bruce Bjornstad. Will this fall on my head tonight? Cozy Fort, brought to you by Steve in Cedro Woolley. All right, I think we're doing okay. I spent 20 minutes trying to get the Bose sound system working. I couldn't get it to work. I don't know why. I had it connected without Bluetooth. So this will not be a booming sound, but I think it'll work. This is the first video I ever made in the field with a crew here at Central Washington University, and I'm just going to show you a portion of it. This was made, I think, in 2011, and we learned a lot of things along the way. Periodically emptied as a raging torrent across eastern Washington. Glacial Lake Missoula in Montana, and the source of many of the floods, attained a depth of 2,000 vertical feet and 500 cubic miles of water. Hang on. At least 40 major floods came from Montana. But there is mounting evidence that the melting ice sheet that covered northern Washington in the Okanagan Valley, for example, was another source for water. These large canyons of Sun Lake's Dry Falls State Park were created quickly by the erosive power of the floods. To understand how the floods took rock away from here, let's hike over to the base of Umatilla Rock. This is a good look at the basalt bedrock that makes up this southern face of Umatilla Rock. We're on the downflowed side of Umatilla Rock. In fact, this basalt makes up all of Dry Falls and all of eastern Washington, really. This is 15-million-year-old rock, which means that these are lava flows that came into this area, bright orange, super hot, started to cool, and these cracks that you see running through this basalt got established 15 million years ago as the lava was cooling. All right, that was our first crack. Tom Foster helped me scout those locations, and we actually hiked to the top of Umatilla with the other camera guys, and they were not loving it. And so then Tom and I went out a year later, just the two of us, with our 2-minute geology episode. And this one never saw the light of day either. This is raw stuff, where Tom is actually letting me do a take, and then he's going, too long, try it again. You know, these were long takes. But I'm sharing it with you, first of all, because nobody's seen it before, and second of all, because we were up on Umatilla, and there's a few B-roll shots in here that I think are very good, and Tom never wanted to publish this one. He just didn't think it was up to our standards, but I thought it was pretty good. We'll see what you think. Bow tie boy. And realize the history of the waterfall system. Minute 12. Hello, young people. Ice Age waterfalls. At the most famous Ice Age waterfall we've got, Dry Falls in north central Washington. Do we really have a waterfall here? How do we know that? That's a cliff, but there's lots of cliffs out here. This cliff system is a series of curved cliffs. That's not an accident. A 10-mile wide section of cliffs that curve with lakes at the bottom of the cliffs, and importantly, a coulee system. In other words, a series of broad, open, box-shaped valleys heading to the south. There's a connection between the Ice Age waterfalls and the lower Grand Coulee. I think those are nice shots. The sun was right. It was after a long day up there. It's quite an effort to get up. I think we even had a ladder to get up one of the steep spots. I don't think we had asked the park's permission, by the way, to film. This is not drone stuff. We're up there just with the camera. Just two guys. There is a connection between Ice Age floods waterfalls and coulees. That waterfall, that curved cliff, hasn't always been there. Originally, it was 15 miles further south, and there was no coulee here. Coulees are places where the waterfalls take rock away. All right, we know the rest of that. As the waterfall rim starts marching northward or retreating. Let's keep it going. All right, this I posted on my YouTube channel before I ever started live streaming with you guys. There's a whole story about me forgetting that I even had a YouTube channel, but that's for another day. But now we're just a few years ago, and we have a budget, and we have animators, and this is kind of a little montage of the making of one of our most exciting animations that if you haven't seen it before, I think that you'll enjoy it. I hope you will. But this has kind of got crappy audio with me just narrating kind of how we put that animation together at Dry Falls. This is 4 minutes long. Hey everybody, this is Nick Zentner. I'm doing some organizing. Found these old clips, thought I'd share them with you. These are some of the animations that were created for our Dry Falls episode of Nick on the Rocks. Maybe you've seen the show on PBS TV here in the Pacific Northwest. These were created by a fella named Donald and Ray down in Portland at Newlands and Associates, and they did a wonderful job. These are some of the original clips that were put together mostly by Ray, with the concept by Chris Smart here at Central Washington University. So the concept was, can we give you some drone footage from Dry Falls? And animators in Portland, can you add the water, Ice Age floodwater, Missoula floodwater, one of the dozens of floods coming down the Grand Coulee? And so here's the early version. Apparently water is incredibly difficult to animate. What do I know? I'm a geology guy. But it took a lot of effort, a lot of time to create the water, to create the dirty brown water, to create the complex interaction between lots of water and the landscape. So here's some actual drone footage where Chris Smart and Rick Spencer from Central went up to the parking lot of Dry Falls and just lifted the drone up above the parking lot. And that was the base visual that was then given to Donald and Ray down in Portland. And they took that and here we go. So there's the same drone footage, but now with the magic of the animators putting in one of the floods coming over Dry Falls. And I've gotten many of comments about how impressive this is and way more water than I ever imagined, and that's all true. I've also heard some criticism, like, I think you guys have exaggerated with this. I don't think it was that big. Well, if anything, we were conservative here. I've also heard some criticism like, well, are you saying that Dry Falls was there before the Ice Age flood came down? And people that know the story know that this is a series of floods, and each major flood changes the position of the waterfall rim, because the water itself is so erosive, it basically tears out the cliff. But that's too complicated for the purpose of this animation. And this was Chris's idea to put an RV in there. That's a real RV driving down the road, and then here's the imaginary water coming in. Audiences seem to like it. So with all this put together, Nick on the Rocks. Hey everybody, welcome to Dry Falls in eastern Washington. Have you been here before? This place is a desert, and yet it's the premier spot to learn about the Ice Age floods, the Missoula floods that came across eastern Washington. 15,000 years ago, there was a waterfall here, but not like the waterfall that you have in your mind, perhaps. Here on the lip of Dry Falls, there was more than 350 feet of water moving 65 miles an hour over this cliff. This is water from a bursting ice dam 170 miles away in Idaho that ripped through central Washington. A wall of water that dwarfed the local landscape with the energy of 10 times the power of all the world's rivers combined. An Ice Age flood with water, rock, soil, and icebergs 3.5 miles wide on a thundering journey to the Pacific Ocean. All right. So yeah, I was reading your comments as we were looking at that. And yeah, you're advanced thinkers now. You know about retreating waterfall and potholes being in the top of Grand Ronde, etc. And, you know, I'm a geologist dealing with a filmmaker and an animator, and they don't have geology backgrounds. And it's a lesson in collaboration and communication and kind of picking your battles. And that's most of the work of Chris Smart, and I think he did an amazing job. But yeah, I've heard plenty in real time with you right now, and others saying, oh, it should have been deeper water, and you should have showed the rim migrating, etc. It's a 5-minute show. It's a 30-second animation, less than that even. So it's education choices with a team of people that don't all have the same backgrounds. Okay. Boy, it's getting hot in here. I promised talking about Palouse Falls. I promised talking about Palouse Falls with you. And there's a very specific story at Palouse Falls. We're not in the Grand Coulee now. I'm not going to go get the map, but you know where Palouse Falls is. It's south of Spokane now. We're away from the Grand Coulee completely, and yet we have a waterfall there. There's some differences, though. There's a river flowing over that waterfall rim today. It's called Palouse Falls. There's an actual waterfall. Of course, it's at Dry Falls at Dry Falls State Park. Palouse Falls is also a state park, and there's an amazing story of how the Ice Age floodwaters did a bunch of carving into the German chocolate cake along pre-existing fractures and actually changed where the Ice Age floodwaters were traveling. They used to flow down Frenchman Coulee, and then there was enough Ice Age flood digging into the cake in these fracture sets that the Ice Age floods eventually said, screw that, we're not going to keep going down Washtecna, we're going to take a hard left and go down what is now the Palouse River Canyon and dump our water directly into the Snake River. That's how far away we are from Grand Coulee. So instead of doing that on the whiteboard and everything else, plus it's already almost 7 o'clock, I can't stop. We're going to look at this 2-minute geology episode, which actually is 4 minutes because we couldn't keep it to 2 minutes, which is another criticism, but whatever. I'm numb to criticism at this point. So I think this is worth our time, especially with our background that we've already had.
2-minute geology, 2-minute geology. Hello, young people. The Palouse River Canyon, just south of Washtecna, Washington. Welcome to Palouse Falls State Park. The crown jewel, the Palouse Falls itself. A 180-foot cliff with the Palouse River cascading over basalt bedrock. It's a beautiful place, especially in spring. But even in winter, during a cold snap, you get much of this water locked in ice. Equally impressive. But we're here for more than the waterfall. We're here to talk about the river canyon itself. The most interesting canyons you'll find anywhere. The upper stretch of the canyon above the falls is perfectly straight, arrow straight, 4-mile stretch.
That's one of those fractures.
Here by the falls, the canyon zigzags back and forth.
Tom
In
Tabbert.
the lower stretch, there's a more classic look to a coulee system with majestic buttes popping up from the canyon floor. And caves have been found with evidence of human history going back 10,000 years. People have been enjoying this place for a long, long time. Geologically, this canyon is not much older than 10,000 years. During the Ice Age, this canyon was not here. The waterfall was not here. The river wasn't even here.
Retreating waterfall.
To tell the story of how this canyon formed, let's go upstream. The peaceful Palouse River, a few miles north of Palouse Falls. That's the road to Pullman in the distance there. Before the Ice Age floods, the Palouse River used to flow parallel to the Snake River, and a divide, a ridge, separated the two V-shaped river valleys. The ridge was composed of fractured basalt bedrock, mantled with wind-blown silt.
That looks familiar, doesn't it?
Cue the Ice Age floods, coming from Montana, cruising through northern Idaho, and barreling down into this tranquil scene. Way too much water for this valley to handle, and the Ice Age floods easily overtopped the ridge and dumped directly into the Snake River. The erosive power of that floodwater did serious damage to the ridge in multiple places. What's now known as Palouse River Canyon, the H.U. Ranch Coulee, and Devil's Canyon. They're parallel cuts, deeply into the basalt bedrock.
We'll stick
wasn't
with
just
it.
the
That's a
list
nice
taken
shot.
away, it was all the bedrock taken away as well. Deep fractures that are parallel to each other
Nice.
controlled where the floods did the most damage, like taking a fire hose to the ridge and etching out those deep fractures. The fractures formed originally 50 million years ago in response to crustal compression from the south and a lateral torquing as well. The Palouse River took advantage of this. In the old days, the Palouse River continued down its river north of the ridge. That's now known as Washtenaw Coulee, and that coulee's dry, no river it anymore. Instead, the Palouse River took advantage of the deepest cut, took a left turn, a south turn into the ridge, and now forms the Palouse River Canyon.
Tom Tabbert. Okay, mercifully, that's the end of me.
We got our answer, right? The Ice Age.
But I still have two more short clips for you from Bruce Bjornstad. We're switching gears now, and I want to show you some amazing video of Bruce flying his drone over the top of the wormy, scalloped, stubborn Grand Ronde flow. And this is from Bruce's YouTube channel. He has many of these wonderful videos. If you're looking for a new YouTube channel to enjoy, Ice Age Floodscapes, YouTube channel by Bruce, Ice Age Floodscapes. Here's his episode, just a small portion of his episode called Babcock Bench. Top of the Grand Ronde, stubborn. Yes, Mark, wormy. That's an amazing shot. Mima Mounds. This is a drone. This is not a helicopter. But thank you, Todd. So as we look at this, you can imagine all the Wanapum lava, all the columns that are gone. They've already been swept away. And the floods were doing their best to carve and haul this stuff away too, but it didn't go very well. Yeah. Babcock Bench, overlooking the Columbia River, right above Crescent Bar. Dramatic music. Thank you, Bruce. And I mentioned last night he's going to come out with a brand new book that is amazing work. I think his best work to date, that takes some of his best photos from his drone and adds text to it. The last video clip before we go to your questions, another one from Ice Age Floodscapes by Bruce Bjornstad. The Great Blade. Look for the same wormy scallops, top of the Grand Ronde, but the difference is, you'll see what the Great Blade is in just a second. It's just like it sounds, and it's a little remnant of Wanapum that didn't totally get swept away. It's right next door to the Grand Coulee. I think you have the background tonight to really see the difference between that little sliver of Wanapum, the Great Blade, and our favorite wormy scallop top of the stubborn Grand Ronde. Let's do it. Ooh, different music. That's the Great Blade, made out of wampum. It's the wall of the lower Grand Coulee in the background. You're looking at the wampum that didn't get swept away. That's the Great Blade itself. Look at that, right up and over. Beautiful. God dang, that's nice. Sweetness. And what's in the distance? Our wormy scallops, the top of the Grand Ronde. Okay. Thanks for your patience. I swear to God, every time I think I'm going to go shorter than the last night, but you know how this is going. Every night is longer. By this rate, I'm going to be going till 9 o'clock. But we still have 800 people, so I guess you're willing to stick this far with us. Okay, live Q&A time. I'll try to answer as many of these as I can. And there's no signs of anybody here yet. It's 5 after 7. So I'll be at this with you for another, 15 minutes, and then we'll see if I'm entertaining in the backyard. Let's go back a little further. Where does the East Lenore Coulee start that helped form the Great Blade, says Jason. East Lenore Coulee. I don't know, Jason. I don't know that the geometry well enough in that particular spot. You must know that area better than I. But as you're driving north, you have the lower Grand Coulee on your left. You have what looks like a big, steep wall on your right, and you do, but it's the Great Blade. And if you stop, there's just a couple places you can stop legally and hike up through that Great Blade. It's just, that blade is very thin. You just saw it. And it's wide open on the other side. Is that East Lenore Coulee? I don't even know, so I'm sorry. Bjornstad's books, all you'd need to do is refer to book 1 of Bruce Bjornstad's Ice Age Floods book, which is in the southern part of Washington, and then the Grand Coulee and Glacial Lake Columbia and the Spokane area and the northern reaches, as it's called. Book 2 is also excellent and much thicker, actually. Maybe we can find some questions that I can actually answer. How deep are the walls of the worms? Jeff, so you mean if we're hiking on the surface of the top of the Grand Ronde and then we get into one of the little worms? Yeah, the scale, you kind of saw us going over the top. If that's what you mean, you can dip into those things, maybe 20 feet high. Maybe the worm scallops are about 20 feet deep, 30 feet deep. And then again, occasionally you have true potholes that are circular, and like the water was working so hard to get rid of that Grand Ronde lava, it was like an underwater tornado. These colks that were just sucking that water up, but it took so much energy to get any basalt away, as opposed to the overlying wampum, which swept away with all those Tootsie Rolls just being plucked away, and away they go. I have made some helicopter videos with Maria Langer. I didn't even know her. She contacted me. She lives in Wenatchee. I literally met her for the first time when she was filming and picked me up at the Ellensburg Airport, and away we went. So she called those Nick Over the Rocks. I think that's what she called the series. There's, I think, 5 or 6 of those helicopter videos with Maria. If you type in Nick Over the Rocks, I think you'll find them. We didn't get low enough like you do with the drone with Bruce, but there's some interesting shots there, plus some live narration between Maria and myself. Have I ever talked about Mima Mounds? Not yet, because nobody has an answer, but maybe that's an episode where we just discuss all the ideas. Was Soap Lake at the edge of a Wanapum lava flow? That's an interesting question. Was it at the edge? Hey! We'll be with you in a few minutes. Yeah, you're in the neighborhood of the edge, but I don't think that's why Grand Coulee is where it is. It's the edge of the ice sheet, and it's that flexure, the Coulee monocline, that's causing that water to come down. But it's an interesting idea. Can you trace the material carried away by the floods back to the source if you find it somewhere downstream? Justin, you would have to know the details of the basalt layers better than anybody else. In other words, you would have this chunk of basalt that was clearly washed, let's say 20 miles downstream, and you'd have to really run a chemistry analysis of that to match it. So it's not easy, and it has not been done. It hasn't even been done with the big erratics we'll talk about next week, that you would think we'd know exactly where those granites and argillites are from specifically, and we don't have as much detail there as we'd like. What would that water register as on the Richter scale when it impacted the Coulee floor? It would be a powerful event, Eric. I don't know how to answer that question. Todd noticed some hanging valleys across the way on the wall, the west wall of the Grand Coulee. People are talking outside. They're trying to figure out which house is mine. Did the water finally cut through the Grand Ronde? The river level is much lower. Yes, Robert. So, excellent point. So, the Columbia River does have walls of Grand Ronde on both sides. But I think you can attribute that to a few of the Ice Age floods that did not go over land but followed the Columbia, which we've talked about in earlier live streams, and just the erosive power of the Columbia River itself. So you have the power of the Columbia that's kind of a sustained action, and then you have a few major Ice Age floods coming right down the Columbia, and that was the magic trick to erode successfully into the stubborn Grand Ronde lava. Hello, Patrick. Was Bretz allowed to teach his students his theory of the Ice Age floods? Did that help people start to believe him? Patrick, age 7. Patrick, I don't know exactly how Bretz operated in the field, but I can guess that with each summer he had a new crop of students and he was teaching them what he had put together. And I'm sure that he was actively discussing with his students these ideas of floods. And it must have been tough for some of the students, because here's their mentor, their teacher, telling them all this stuff that isn't in any of the textbooks. And I don't know, maybe some of the students thought he was off his rocker. But an interesting point that some of you made at one of the live streams when we were talking about Bretz, a few of you asked how many of his former students carried on with his work in the Ice Age floods, and the answer is 0. He had many students out here doing the field work, and yet, to my knowledge, none of them kind of took the torch from Bretz and continued his work, even though they had sweat equity into the project. So, you can draw your own conclusions from that. Why do the basalt layers have different levels of resistance to the water? Were conditions different when each lava layer cooled and hardened, or was it the actual makeup of each flow that was different? Thanks for the question, Nick. There's some factors that we know. One of them is thickness. Those Grand Ronde lavas were much thicker than the Wanapum. The thicker the flow, the less cracked it will be. The less cracked it will be, the more stubborn it will be to erosion. That's as simple as I can make it. And I'm not making it simple just for you. That's about all that I understand with that. But the relationship between stubborn Grand Ronde and wimpy Wanapum is a major theme out there from my point of view. Not a whole lot of people hit that hard, but I think it's a major story. What did Brett's call the wormy scallops? I could sit down with that book right now and find the page and describe it to you, but I haven't read it that carefully. Let's do a few more. I've got growing numbers of voices out there. Are there any columnar basalts intact, found jumbled or piled up or washed down flow? Thank you, Scout. I can't think of an intact column that's just sitting on the ground like Tootsie Rolls. I can't think of a Tootsie Roll just laying intact, like horizontally, like a half a mile down flow. So you can think of those Tootsie Rolls truly as Tootsie Rolls. And you can think of the water coming over a waterfall, and this is one of them, right? Or this is technically Saddle Mountain, and the water's getting into those fractures and just plucking those Tootsie Rolls away from the rest of them. And because they're so heavily segmented, it's the first thing to go is just busting the column into these individual ice cubes, and then each ice cube gets busted up again. So it's a pretty quick story of getting down to boulders the size of this porch and smaller, even moving them a few hundred yards. Are Kolk ponds and potholes the same thing, formed the same way? Thank you, Natalie. Kolking to me is an action of drilling down and sucking out material. Now, whether that's in a river stream in an eddy, or whether that's out here in the channeled scablands. So to me, it's the same thing, but maybe your Kolk ponds are something different. I don't know about technical places called Kolk ponds necessarily, but if you're talking about Eastern Washington, yes, those Kolk ponds are the same as potholes. Any reason why the waterfalls create curved cliffs? Todd, I've struggled with this, and it's a physics question and a math question, especially by the way, somebody sent me this postcard of Steamboat Rock, and I really appreciate it. It's an old vintage postcard, and you sent a very nice little note. I can't read your name, so I'm sorry. I don't know who to thank, but I love the old postcard, and I will use it for sure. That's in the Upper Grand Coulee. I've asked as many people as I can think of to explain why looking down on Frenchman Coulee, there's a curved cliff like that. You're looking down now. And there's another curved cliff next door. This is Frenchman Coulee and this is Echo Coulee. And there's a great blade in between the two. When you jump over to Potholes Coulee, you have two plunge pools, two curved cliffs. And there's just basically a big Quincy Basin bathtub where water is heading that way. I've had some folks try to explain the math and the physics of why curves are necessary and how water flows and you get maximum points of incision. It's beyond me. What type of sediment has filled the bottom of those wormholes? Probably loess, blown in later. Gavin's dad, Joe, age 42, was the Grand Ronde the heart of the German chocolate cake? Was it the middle, the beginning, end, or what? This is the best way to remind us all. We looked at this very quickly before. The Grand Ronde is this percentage of the cake, and I would think of it as the heart of the cake, where we have some early flows and some late flows, and these are the dates of when those lavas were active. I'm hearing more and more voices out there, so we're going to go 5 more minutes and then I think we're done. Here in the UK, a few similar holes found on seabed of English Channel formed by 400,000-year-old when the ice dam lake in North Sea overflowed a rock ridge into the plunge pools 100 meters deep, kilometers wide. From Wikipedia. Thank you, Peter. I'm ignorant, but it sounds like there's a wonderful Ice Age floods story similar to ours with the English Channel and forming what we see topographically underneath that water. I've heard it enough and I've casually kind of talked to folks about it that it's a thing. I don't know any more than that. Are all the waterfalls along the Oregon border of the Columbia River produce coulees? Thanks, Wildflower. Those are not. Those are because the layers are tilted and the rivers are coming to the Columbia River Gorge, and it's suddenly a very steep wall. So not a coulee story and not an Ice Age flood story up that high on both walls. No, on the Oregon side of the Columbia River Gorge. We did a live stream on that. Okay, one more and we're done. Who got the majority of the material that the flood carved out and dumped at the end? That's a great way to finish. So here's our semi-successful coulee that was carved into our butter, which is the German chocolate cake. I'll be curious to read the comments and see if you thought that was helpful or not. And the question is, where did the stuff go? And one answer is, in the Grand Coulee, if you go just south of Soap Lake on State Route 17, the miles between Soap Lake and Moses Lake, there are incredible fields full of thousands and thousands of boulders, most of them basalt. And they got dropped right as soon as those Ice Age floodwaters left the coulee and spilled out into the northern part of the Quincy Basin. So that's one answer. But of course, you can grind that stuff down. You can bump those segments of the Tootsie Roll together more and more until you get it down to sand. And then you can carry that material all the way to the ocean, if you like. A toast for you. A toast to you. Here's to your health, the health of your parents and your grandparents, the health of your children and your grandchildren. Thank you to all the truckers and the grocery store workers and all the folks that are getting essential items to us on a daily basis. Many of us are living a normal life through this whole thing, thanks to all of your efforts. I know that many of the rest of us are profoundly changed by this experience, loss of job, changes in lots of things with our lives. But a precious few of us are able to continue on doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, thanks to the generosity and support and hard work of many others. So here's to all of us around the world. Thanks for joining us tonight. I will not see you tomorrow night. The next two live streams are Saturday and Sunday morning, 9 o'clock Pacific time, and we'll talk about climate. Saturday morning, climate patterns within the Ice Age. Sunday morning, going back tens of millions of years and talking about what we know about relationships between volcanic eruptions and global climate change. Ooh, boy, that should be interesting. Thanks for joining us tonight. I got to head out to the backyard. Have a good Friday, everybody. We'll see you Saturday. I love you. Good night from Ellensburg, Washington.